"Daddy, is she dying?" She came in chains, but he gave her a dress, a name, and a second life. Witness this unbelievable true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The winter air in Willow Creek was sharp enough to sting the skin, the kind of cold that sank deep into the bones. Sheriff James Callahan adjusted his scarf as he led his daughter Emily toward the old freight station on the edge of town. The station hadn't seen a train in nearly 15 years, yet today it buzzed with life, men murmuring in disbelief, women clutching shawls around their shoulders, children peeking curiously from behind their parents' legs. Word had spread quickly. Someone had been found, someone who shouldn't have survived. Inside the dim station office, on the bench near the stove that hardly gave off any heat, sat a young woman bound in chains. She looked like a ghost, pulled from the ashes of another life. Her hair hung in tangled knots, her skin was pale and bruised, and her clothes were little more than rags clinging to a fragile frame. She did not speak, did not cry, only shivered as though even the fire had abandoned her. Emily, just 9 years old, gripped her father's hand tighter. Her wide eyes studied the figure in silence before her small voice broke through the tension. "Daddy, is she dying?" James swallowed hard. The truth was, he didn't know. The woman looked half dead, her body trembling from cold and fear alike. But he also knew that despair was not what his daughter needed to hear. He crouched down so Emily could see his eyes. "No, sweetheart. She's hurt, but she's still alive. She just needs someone to help her." The chains rattled when the woman shifted. The men who had found her, farm hands clearing out a derelict property outside town, had been quick to bind her, afraid of what she might do or who she might be. Rumors already circulated. She was a runaway, a criminal, maybe even dangerous. James looked closer and saw something different, someone who had suffered so much that she no longer knew how to live. He stood tall, his sheriff's badge catching the dim light. "Unlock her," he ordered. One of the men frowned. "Sheriff, she could be trouble. We don't know where she came from, don't know what she's capable of." James's voice carried the weight of authority. "What she's capable of right now is freezing to death if we leave her chained." "Unlock her." Reluctantly, the men obeyed. The iron cuffs clattered as they fell to the floor. The woman didn't run, didn't even move away. She simply pulled her knees to her chest, shrinking into herself as though the world outside the chains was too large to face. James removed his heavy wool coat and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her, but for the first time she looked up. Her eyes, haunted, sunken, yet undeniably human, met his. For a brief second, there was recognition, not of him, but of safety, of someone who would not strike or hurt her. "Come on," James said gently. "You're safe now." That evening, against the objections of several townsfolk, James brought the woman back to his home. Some whispered that it was reckless. Others muttered that the sheriff had lost his mind. But Emily, small and innocent, was the only one who smiled as they walked through the snow. "We're bringing her home, Daddy? Like a guest?" "Like family," James answered without hesitation, though he wasn't sure how true that could be. Their farmhouse was simple but warm, with logs crackling in the fireplace and the smell of stew lingering in the air. James guided the woman to a chair at the kitchen table, setting a bowl of food before her. She stared at it like she'd forgotten what eating meant. Emily climbed onto the chair across from her, chin resting on her small fists. "Daddy says you're safe now. Did you know that?" The woman's lips parted, but no sound came out. A tear slid down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. She lifted the spoon with trembling hands and took a bite. The first taste seemed to remind her of something long lost. She ate slowly, as though afraid the food would disappear if she rushed. Later, James fetched a bundle from the cedar chest upstairs. It had belonged to his late wife, gone now nearly 5 years. Inside were dresses carefully folded, preserved not out of necessity but memory. He chose one, a pale blue dress with faded lace that still carried the faint scent of lavender. He left it outside the washroom door, along with a bar of soap and a basin of warm water. When the woman emerged, Emily gasped. She looks like a princess, Daddy. The girl twirled with excitement as though seeing something magical. James studied her quietly. Without the chains, without the rags, she no longer looked like a ghost. She was still thin, still scarred by whatever horrors had brought her here, but there was life in her eyes now, fragile though it was. "Do you have a name?" James asked gently. The woman shook her head slowly, her expression filled with shame. Either she had forgotten, or she could not bring herself to speak it. "Then we'll give you one," James said after a pause. His voice was calm but resolute. "Names matter. They remind us who we are. From today on, you'll be Grace, because that's what brought you here, and it's what will carry you forward." Her lips trembled. A single word whispered past them, almost inaudible. Grace. From that night, Grace became a part of the Callahan household. She was quiet, often retreating into silence, but she began to help around the house, stirring soup, folding laundry, feeding the chickens with Emily in the early mornings. Emily treated her like an older sister, asking endless questions, telling stories, even braiding flowers into her tangled hair. James noticed the small changes too. The first time Grace smiled, just a faint curve of her lips while watching Emily chase fireflies in the yard. It felt like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. The first time she laughed, soft and hesitant, it startled even her, as though she'd forgotten the sound existed. But healing was not instant. Some nights, James heard her crying softly in the room down the hall. Other times, she woke screaming, nightmares tearing through the fragile peace she was beginning to build. Emily would rush in with her small hands, whispering, "It's okay. Grace, Daddy says you're safe." And somehow, Grace always calmed under that childlike faith. Rumors continued to swirl in Willow Creek. People demanded answers. Where had she come from? What had happened to her? Why had no one claimed her? James investigated quietly, piecing together fragments of truth. The farmhouse where she had been found belonged to a family that had disappeared years earlier. Some said it had been a hideout for criminals. Others whispered darker things, about trafficking, about people taken and never seen again. Grace, when asked, could not speak of it. She would freeze, eyes filling with terror, her hands trembling until she nearly dropped whatever she was holding. James stopped pressing. He realized that some truths were too heavy to pull from her yet. What mattered was that she was alive, here and beginning to rediscover what it meant to be human. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Emily climbed into James's lap by the fire. Grace sat nearby, knitting clumsily with yarn Emily had insisted on giving her. "Daddy," Emily whispered, resting her head on his chest, "do you think she'll stay with us forever?" James looked at Grace. Her hands fumbled with the needles, but there was determination in her eyes. She caught his gaze and for the first time didn't look away. "I think," James said slowly, "she's already home." And though the road ahead was long, though the scars of her past would never fully fade, that night marked the beginning of something rare and unshakable. A second life built not on chains, but on trust, kindness, and the fragile threads of hope. Grace had come to Willow Creek in chains, but in the Callahan home she found a dress, a name, and perhaps the first glimpse of freedom she had ever known.